Episode number 6.
Maybe I'm naive, but I think life is a lot more than just showing up.
Welcome to the Be Real Show with Travis Too Tall and Huff, where we talk about solutions, tips, and tricks for social marketers and businesses.
Well, hello and welcome. This is Travis Too Tall and Huff, and I have a lightning fire on the phone here today. We have my man, Michael Brenner. Michael, are you ready to be real?
Let's do this, Travis. I'm ready.
My man. Michael is the head of strategy at NewsCred and also the former VP of marketing and content at SAP. He's also a speaker, author, and blogger at B2B Marketing Insider. Michael, we've given our listeners just some insights about you, but tell us more, my man.
Yeah, I'll start, I guess, where I started my career. Just give some people a little background that maybe some people aren't familiar with. But I, lifetime marketer, but started my career in sales, and was actually not too bad at it. I enjoyed helping customers. That was kind of the approach that I took, and was able to achieve some success in a selling environment. But I wanted to do more, and I moved into marketing because I wanted to help people at scale. And so, I look at each step of my career, I look back at each of the stages I've been through, and been blessed to have taken each step that I have. The one thing that ties all my experience together is just focus on customers, focus on helping people, and feel honored and privileged to be in a position where I'm able to do that with brands all over the world.
Awesome. So tell us, we're going to start with a Be Real story, something where, maybe it's one of those harder moments that, maybe a failure. Has there been a time where you failed, do you feel like, in social media?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I had one of those oh no moments for sure, trying to keep it family friendly. But when I was head of digital for SAP North America, and they asked me, I was sort of doing online marketing, and social was just getting going, and they said, hey, you've got a Twitter handle, so can you manage social media for us as well? So I'm like, okay,
oh, man.
I can take it on. So it turned into a digital head of digital kind of a role, which include paid, earned, and kind of owned social and digital channels. And one of the things that I really struggled with was, at a company with 60,000 employees and 20 product lines and serving every industry, 26 different named industries and everything that there is, we really struggled with managing the proliferation of channels, right? Every VP wanted their own Twitter account, and all they wanted to do was, think about it in a traditional way, promoting products and trying to get people to come to events and things like that. So I had to put together, in some ways, kind of a list of requirements that people had to go through, mandatory requirements I tried to make, but not everybody listened. And so we had a new product launch, and we had a group of folks that outsourced the creation of a Twitter account that was specific to this one product. And what they did was they created like a fake person who would just like tweet out, hey, this product is awesome. Here's a link if you want to buy it. And it was an absolute disaster.
Gotcha.
We got called out, and luckily, the folks, there's some pretty aggressive folks in the community at the time, and luckily they sort of like, oh man, lesson learned. That was a bummer. So they didn't destroy us, but it could have been really, really bad. And so that was probably my worst day in social media.
Yep. There's no doubt that we all have that moment where you just make that lesson is taught to you sometimes in a hard way, but it allows you to, adapt early. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest failures, I think, of social marketers is those that don't learn from those aha moments, if you want to call it, or just those moments of pain that really give us that clarity of, hey, you know what, this is something that we need to take serious. And, in this case, being, in an outsourced company for you on that certain situation with that strategy is not going to work, and spamming people's profiles on LinkedIn doesn't work,
exactly.
The authenticity of personality is really where it's all about. And it's the cool thing about failure is that, you learn from it, and there's really no wrong failure. So we're also going to now take us to a Be Real moment that social marketing changed your complete mindset to the game of business.
Yeah. It's so this one's a little bit more of a personal story, but I think it reflects some of the reasons why I think I learned why being real was really important, to kind of support the theme you've got. So I jumped onto Twitter. I wouldn't say early. I was probably, sort of a late early adopter on Twitter. Right. So like early 2009, I think it was. And there were already plenty of rock stars on Twitter. I jumped on. I'm like, I should probably figure this thing out. And I was doing it for like 3-4 months, I think even 6 months. And I'm just like following people and trying to comment and share stuff that I thought was good. It was, I was really trying to kind of understand the channel itself. And, aside from just being a news feed, I was trying to figure out, how do you make this work? How do you make this work to gain connections and gain real sort of actions out of people? And I to be honest with you, 6 months in, didn't get it. And then finally, I started blogging, in early 2010. And so I spent 6 months, almost 8 months building, following people, retweeting their stuff, liking them, commenting on their blog posts. Not because I had any selfish intentions, but just because it was, they were doing good stuff. And and what I didn't realize was that I had built equity. And so I started blogging thinking no one was ever going to read the crap that I was writing. And, who the hell's going to care about this guy who's now written only 1 or 2 or 3 blog posts? And, who nobody knew who I was. And as soon as I started, I had way more engagement, not massive numbers, but way more engagement with the audience of folks that I was, sort of superficially engaging with online. They were sharing my stuff. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't ask them to do that, and commenting on my blogs. And it was just, for me, it was a real light bulb moment that there's this sort of, there's a total feedback loop between creating great content, sharing great content, and creating connections with people in a real way. And I think whether you call it altruism or, building social equity or however you want to define it or look at it, the light bulb moment for me was just that connection between, sharing your stuff, sharing other people's stuff, doing it in a way or with an intention to help people.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the, the core essences of social networking. It's like a friendship, you're shaking hands, it's, you do have the ability to connect to a lot of people, but really it's one-on-one. No one really has 1,000 people, call them in one day to do business. So you don't need the thousands of people to really move this in a business light. It's really individually and taking it personal and building that, tribe or that, fan following, like, the celebrities of like Lady Gaga and Justin Bieber have, where they'll do anything for them, exactly. And they feel connected and personal. And I love what you say about Twitter too, because it's one of those platforms that if you're not taking it seriously, then you're going to be, it's going to be hard to build a network. I think, like what you've built, I think you was like 56 or 57,000 followers already right now.
I'm not sure.
And that's what the publishers are looking at for book deals. You have to have a required amount of, followers, but not also just followers, but real true people that are going to help you. And I believe in the next 10 years, Twitter specifically is just going to take off even more as far as everybody else that has been waiting on the sidelines. But also, I think the combination of what you're talking about with content and writing and then Twitter is the most powerful. Yeah. Have you checked out I just found a new cool app to use. It's called Juice from paper.ly. Yeah, it's a fun little app that helps kind of curate content and stuff like that too, just to throw it out there, because I just recently found it. It's really cool. It's very helpful to, give you some additional content or thoughts, to even write about, as far as just what's being said and what's being talked about. So let's take us to an epic moment. Take us to that, like, complete, I know you said you've already had, some success and you've seen this light bulb change, but take us to that epic moment. Take us to that retweet. Take us to that point where you're just like, wow, this is really, I'm meeting my influencer. I'm, connecting to someone I never thought I'd connect to, or getting, viewed by someone I never thought I would get viewed by.
Yeah. It's, so it's actually someone who now, I wouldn't say we're close friends, but, somebody that I would consider a friend. And 3 years ago, I worshiped at the altar of Ann Hanley.
Oh yeah.
So,
awesome.
Most people know Ann, and when I got on Twitter, obviously she's, had been and still is one of the most connected people and genuine people on Twitter. So I, sort of followed her and emulated her and really tried to learn from the things that she was doing. I read Content Rules, the book that she co-wrote, and, really started following kind of her, in her footsteps as much as I could as a social media activist or evangelist. And then, I met her at a conference. I actually sort of stalked her at a conference, to be honest.
Nice.
And she was on a panel. It was such a superstar panel. Now that I look back, it was, especially for those of you in content marketing, aspect of social, it was Ann Hanley, Joe Pulizzi, Joe Chernov, and I think Pawan Deshpande from Curata. And they were all on a panel. And afterwards, I just walked up to the panel and introduced myself and got to know all four of those guys, and all four of them are really, really super smart, really, really super nice people. And so that was the first interaction. And then, started going to shows, and then ultimately started doing some webinars and some speaking engagements, and got to see some of those folks regularly. I never once asked Ann for a retweet because she told me a story once, I think, that, she gets asked, I think, like dozens or hundreds of times, I think probably in a day, for people to retweet stuff. So I never asked her. And like I said, I got to be sort of friendly with her. And, a couple of times, I remember the first time she, retweeted something of mine without any, request or hope even in my mind. And that was the moment for me. It was just like, you've arrived when Ann Hanley retweets you. So it was a pretty cool moment from a really cool lady. And, she's super, super awesome. So, it was a big moment for me.
It's all about keeping that real, you start online and then it goes offline, like you mentioned, and that's the value of those, networking and really, building that opportunity, even just to get on the phone, I think is a way to get, if you want to call it offline, and build that relationship, and then obviously take it back online. And then, the cool part is that, you have that mutual respect for each other now, where you have a thought leader retweeting you, and that's just, it's priceless. You couldn't ask for or pay for that. And I think that that's just something that every social marketer and anyone in business should be really taking this story and thinking about how I can do this for my brand, because, too many times we think corporate thinks real corporate and not personal. And when you get personal down to that personal level, connecting with those influencers and being able to have them influence now, your message is something that you can't pay for, and you can't do a boosted post, or you can't pay Twitter ads. It's just something you have to make happen through your content, but also through a real organic approach of connecting to people and being real with them. And that is such a cool story. So now we're about to enter what I'm going to call the B realisms. It's, entering your mindset, giving us some short answers to give our team some insight in how they can get a better strategy in life. So let's go here. Start with this. In a perfect world, what would you say is your dream job? Who would you want to work for? What business would you want to start?
Yeah. Honestly, I know this is going to sound a little trite, but I think I'm in my dream job. And there are certainly days when the tweets are flying, the emails are flying, I'm booked, I'm over scheduled with calls all day. And I wish that I was just like cutting grass or, trimming bushes or something. There's certainly days when I feel that way. But to be honest, I feel like I'm CEO of Brand Me, which is something, for those of us who are in their 40s and remember a Fast Company article back in 1994 or 5, I think it was, Brand You, Tom Peters wrote, what I think was one of the greatest magazine articles ever on business innovation. But I really do feel, it took me a long time, but I feel like I am CEO of my own brand in a way that feels, I work for a company that helps me pay the bills, but I don't feel like I'm cheating them, right? I feel like I'm bringing value to the company with the brand that I've built. I'm bringing value to our company's customers with the experience that I've had, and so it's just a perfect combination. I think I saw like a Venn diagram at one point where like the perfect job is where what you love and what you're good at is something that people are willing to pay for, and I feel like I've reached that point, so I'm pretty happy.
That is awesome. That is so true. It's the combination of, your happiness is the combination of having control of your time, bringing value, and, having the flexibility and being, in a position like you are, you're a thought leader, and you are bringing value to your business. Even with your other posts that have nothing to do with their business, you're bringing value to them and looked at as an authority of thoughts and content. And so tell me this, how do you typically like to start your day?
Yeah, I'm not a morning person, so I start a little slow. I usually start with kind of like, sort of hitting all the inboxes, and, it used to just be email, but obviously I check email for anything urgent, scan notifications on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I've definitely tried to get to, I think, I probably hit 20 different sites before I really even wake up. Business Insider is a site that I go to pretty regularly. I get the week's top 10 things you need to know today, email, newsletter, Nuzzle. I don't know if you're familiar with Nuzzle, but Nuzzle kind of tells you what your connections are sharing or have shared in the past day.
I like that. Nuzzle.
Yeah.
N-U-Z-Z-L-E?
E-L, I think it is. There's also Newsly, N-E-W-S-L-E, which tells you which of your connections have been mentioned in the news. That's another good one. So that's it. I pretty much start my day with a attempt to kind of get to understand what happened in the world in the last 24 or 12 hours. And then I jump in the shower and I let hot water run over my head for about 10 minutes. That's how I start my day.
Nice. I like that. I like that strategy. Getting it going, that current pulse of what's going on in the environment really allows you to have better conversations. Also probably better content too, because you're really knowing what's going on. And I'm a huge believer of reading and checking out blogs and articles, because I think that that's the newest newspaper, obviously of the world today. And it's so easy to do on your phone. And I really appreciate you giving us some cool apps that you use as well, so that we can check those out and maybe take advantage of those as well. Yep. This is a little hard one. It's always something that every person really kind of not necessarily struggles with, but we always kind of have a good answer for. But tell us one of your biggest weaknesses.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at dinner a couple of weeks ago with a group of people. We were talking about how when you interview somebody, everybody is supposed to have that answer to the question that's actually a strength.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's the trick,
like,
right? In the classic interview question. To be honest, mine really is one of those. I think it's a blessing and a curse, so to speak. I'm extremely impatient. And it drives my wife and kids nuts sometimes because, like when I need to get something done, I need to get it done. And traffic and slow internet connections are like the kinds of things that just make me want to kill myself, right? And at the same time, it's what drives me. It really, I try to set myself deadlines a lot, because that's sort of the force multiplier for me to get stuff done and to get it done efficiently and be doing the right things. I try to do 2 blog posts a week, for example. I try to make sure I'm sort of, wishing people happy birthdays and congratulating people on new jobs in LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. I just sort of view it from a deadline perspective, because then my impatience kicks in and it's like, I got to get it done.
Right. And I'm feel the same way, because if you don't get it done, you're going to just, let it all slide by. So you got to act, take that time and act, in a real time manner, taking some time out of your day, putting some other stuff on the side to, do these things, congratulate a couple people, give some birthdays, give some shout outs, because otherwise it's going to go by and you're going to forget about it and you're not going to come back to it. And it's really the same with anything. Obviously, even writing a blog post, it's like, if you don't get it done, sometimes you'll find a million other things to do. And so, having those deadlines is what's vital for success. So then also, I guess it's that give us one of your biggest strengths then as well.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to use the same one, right? So it's, I think I get shit done. it's
Get shit done. I love that.
You know,
that is it. That's a real talk advice right there.
GSD, man. It's and it's funny. My wife is the same way. In fact, she's like 10 times what I'm like. But yeah, no, it's I think it's like when I get my W-4 forms, I don't wait until much past like February 1st or 2nd to get my taxes done. It's just it just helps me to clear my head and to constantly be focusing on, I think, what's important. At the same time, so I'm like, trying to move the big rocks and motivate myself to do the right things. At the same time, constantly checking everything all the time for, digital signals that I think are important. And so, minimizing, I think, the amount of time stuff that we spend on, you could spend your whole day looking at Instagram, right? But so trying to minimize that stuff because it's just not productive, right? So I love to do it, but try to minimize that.
Absolutely. If you're not getting things done, you're just sitting there wasting time. And
That's right.
I totally believe that same strategy, like you said, is just if you're not moving and you're not getting things done, then hey, you know what? It's not going to ever happen. So I think that's one of the best advice so far that we've heard. And I think that if you take that to heart, guys, then your content's going to be better this year if you get it done. Don't be afraid about what people are going to say. Don't be afraid about how many likes and comments and shares you're going to get. Get it done. Move it forward. And you'll be better on your next blog.
Yep.
So what's also some of the best advice? Do you have someone that's giving you some just epiphany advice?
It was probably the best, worst advice I've ever had. But I remember I had an advisor in college who told me that he said something like 98% of life is just showing up. And I sort of took that to heart. And at first I was like, that's pretty sad. Maybe I'm naive, but I think life is a lot more than just showing up. And maybe there are large groups of people that are barely showing up. And I certainly have experienced that inside certainly large companies where, you see them, you can see it, right? There's people that just show up, they sit in their chair, they do what they need to do, they go home and they collect a paycheck. And for me, I just never wanted to be that person. I never wanted to be that person on two levels. One, I never wanted to be the guy giving some 20-year-old kid advice that life is just all about showing up. That's not the kind of person I wanted to be, number one. I wanted to be the kind of person that inspires people to, reach beyond what they think they can achieve. So that was number one. And number two was I wanted to kind of prove him wrong. And I appreciate, I think his intentions were all good. And he was a good guy. He volunteered his time to, as a professional to mentor, college kids emerging from sort of this, the safety of being in a university situation. And so I didn't harbor any ill will, but just it motivated me, just based off of kind of negative experience to go well beyond showing up, to, bring, if not my best every day, the best that I could muster is, I think, the way that I think about it.
Every day is different. You're going to have different energy levels every day. You can do your best, but we're all going to have different things going on. And so if you do the best you can, showing up is part of it. But if you don't live, breathe, eat, we always say blood, sweat, tears, have that passion on your sleeve, and you're not talking and telling people about what you do, and they know what you do, then people are going to go to someone else when they need their help. And, if they don't feel like the other person is as passionate as you are, who do you think they're going to go to, do business with? Is the person that shows the passion, because they're going to bring that same passion to the project. Yep. And I love what you're saying about that, because it's so true. I mean, it's, you have to show up, but you got to have that will. You can't just be some dead weight in a seat, and just sitting there, you got to have that drive. Especially in today's day and age when people and jobs are difficult to have, in any environment, it's difficult. So if you're not that passionate person that's maybe doing a couple extra things for your boss and doing a couple extra things for the company, they might look at your job at some point, and so I think, don't be that dead weight, live and breathe the passion of the business. So we're going to get into the hot seat. These are some short answers, giving us some phenomenal resources and just some of your insights into the internet and some other resources that you use. But we're also going to ask a couple really cool questions for you. The first one is this: be real. If you could have lunch with anyone in the world today, who would it be and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I recently read the book Storytelling Inc. It's by the folks that founded Pixar and worked with Steve Jobs and ultimately got bought by Walt Disney Animation now. I think it's Walt Disney Animation Pixar. And Ed Catmull's the guy who sort of wrote the book, but he also talks about the folks that got the first sort of huge successes going with Toy Story and Incredibles and Monsters Inc. and just a great group of guys kind of coming together, really creative, amazingly creative minds coming together. I'd love to sit down with any of them. What's interesting, I think, about what they've done is they've been able to turn the creative process and amazing storytellers into a business. And what the book is really about is how do you maintain that? How do you maintain that level of creativity in a business that's about storytelling, right? So it's kind of like, to me, the problem that every large company is facing. If I could have lunch with anybody, it's starting with Ed. I think John Lasseter was one of the big players in that group, and just sit down with them and just pick their brains on, hey, I get you're a great storyteller, and I'd love to learn some of those key, sort of techniques from you. But how do you maintain that over time? How do you build a business around it? How do you connect with people in a way that makes them want to pay for your content? I mean, I think that's the question that the whole world needs to understand the answer to.
Oh yeah, because we're all now in control of our own networks. Mm-hmm. But the content that we put out on those networks is what is going to go viral and take us to the next level, take us to the upworthy, kind of shareable to the universe level, Gangnam Style, I always like to say, because it was one of the biggest music videos to reach in the billions. Mm-hmm. And, content is where it's at. And if you're not thinking of it and your business is just pushing your, traditional advertising on your social media, you're going to get what you get, and it's not going to take you where you want to go. And I think that's something that all entrepreneurs and business owners want more of, is having that kind of Pixar creative, awesome, like Chipotle did with their whole campaigns recently. Yep. It's just this creativity that exists that you don't see unless you're spending, the effort, time, energy, and, we talked about blood, sweat, and tears, being excited. That goes from the top down. So tell us, do you have a skill that you wish you had, learn more of? Do you want to learn, how to become a karate master, or anything cool that you have an aspiring skill for?
You took my answer, karate. No,
nice.
Kidding. No, just kidding. No, interestingly, I found yoga kind of early. I was going to yoga classes, like I was the only dude for real. Like I was the only guy in yoga classes for like 5 years, and then all of a sudden all these guys started showing up, and I'm like, hey, what's going on here? I had all these beautiful women to myself, but no, seriously, it was. I found myself that sort of. Thinking about meditation and I think some of the balance that you can achieve mentally and physically from things like yoga, because I think mental focus is probably the skill. I think is really important. We live in such a noisy world, and you think of Times Square. I mean, sometimes every day feels like that for me, and I know it does for many people. You add kids to the mix and 2 jobs, and it's just, it can get pretty crazy. And so mental focus, I think, in a noisy, complicated world is certainly the skill I'd love to master.
Absolutely. I think that's honestly some of the most wise advice, because having that still mind, it leads to precise thoughts. And when you're able to meditate, it really gives you this extra level of getting stuff done, like we talked about before, just working through stuff and having this mental clarity, because you don't have the noise as much. Yep. And I'm 6'8", so I don't know what I could do on yoga, but I've always wanted to, and I think that might be something I'm going to have to try now. Now that you mentioned, so then also, is there any favorite internet device or app or resource that you like using on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's, Pandora is probably the app that I use the most on my phone, just from an app perspective. Buffer, I think, is awesome. I not only love their blog, But I think their app is amazing, and I actually use them as an example of the kind of company that really knows how to kind of growth hack their way to success. And I think I mentioned the others, right? So Nuzzle and Newsly, both things. One that your audience may or may not be familiar with, but Triberr. So Tribeerr. So Triberr, 2 R's. That's basically like a community of bloggers, and it's not automated sharing because I don't really believe in automated sharing. But what it is it allows me to connect with folks whose blogs I really enjoy in a community-based approach, and it essentially brings them up in a like an inbox style where I can say, oh, Andrew just wrote this post. I love that. I'm going to share it. I just read it. I'm going to share it. Or, Jen just wrote this post. It's not her best. I'm not going to share that one today. But it's just basically a list of blog articles from authors that you really enjoy and you connect with. And what's really interesting is not only do we sort of share each other's stuff, but I've created really amazing connections and found some great people in that community that's helping me to help support what I'm trying to do and has led me to connections that have really helped my professional career as well.
Awesome. I'm going to have to check that one out because I started embracing the blog last year and really spending time at least writing 2 to 3 blogs on my own. And then we work with our team to help kind of create some other blogs based on our brainstorming and stuff like that. But I think, the biggest thing is trying to how to influence that, and also honestly, like you mentioned too, just, really connecting with the thought leaders that you like to read and allow you to also, kind of give your insights and give them love so they can see that because it's important for everybody. It's not a numbers game. It's not about how many thousands of comments you have on it. It's quality people that are seeing this that you want to impact, and nothing else really matters because you can go get and buy impressions and all sorts of other stuff via ads, via all sorts of crazy companies out there on the internet. It's really just about that authenticity. And I love what you're saying about this. So Triberr, guys, Triberr, check it out. Now let's finish it up here. If you could develop any new business in the world, what would it be?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's a big one. Let's see. If you could find a way here's something that frustrates me all the time, right? You can't text and drive. And we all get too many emails, texts, notifications, and everything on our phone. Just the whole, I don't know whether it's a personal assistant who can read your emails and you can delete them, or they figure out the whole voice recognition, OCR kind of thing. But, I've got Bluetooth. I can take a call. I just wish I could, if I could develop that killer app, it would be, how do I scan, filter, delete, read, reply to emails and notifications, from a Bluetooth, while driving type of a situation. That would be, I think, the killer app.
Ding, winner, chicken dinner right there on that one. I think that's one that I've heard in multiple interviews as well as on my own frustration as well. And I think that developers, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, if you guys want to take advantage, I think you guys need to connect with my man, Michael,
that's right,
and make that a reality here in the next couple of years, because I think that would be a big one. Let's finish it up with one last real talk thought. And also, how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Yeah. One of the best lines that I love to sort of spout or I even refer to it when I talk to people is Leo Burnett said, help people and you help the business. And I just see so many businesses out there that are just trying to promote themselves and people out there just trying to promote themselves. And, that just doesn't work. And I think when we started the conversation this way, I think when you have a truly well-intentioned desire to help people, you end up helping yourself and helping your business. So that would be my last final thought. And if I can help any of your listeners out there, please have them reach out to me on Twitter at Brenner Michael. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Google Plus as well, and would really love to connect with any of you.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael. You have been hanging out with Michael Brenner. Thank you guys so much for your time, and keep being real.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by realtimeoutsource.com, your social